Okay, let's go on and carry on to part 2 of 6.4. So what I have here is a little diagram, and we're going to talk about area. So you can see across the bottom I have an X and a 5, and on the side I have an X and a 2. So if I were to look at just this part A, just this block here, what would be the area of just this piece? What do you think? We would multiply the two sides together, right? So it would be X here across the bottom times the X here up the side. So the area of this block A is going to be X squared. Now for part B, we have them here. Now I have a 5 across the bottom, but what do I have up the side? That one might be a little bit harder to see, but if you look, this height of B matches up with how big X is, right? So B is going to be 5 times X, so it's 5X. How about C? If you look at C, we're going to have a 2 times what? Again, if you look, this area here, this length right here, corresponds with this X down here, right? So that is also X. So C is 2X. And finally D, oh, let's change colors. D, any guesses? He's going to be 2 times 5. Okay, so that's 10. So what this tells us is that the area of this diagram that I drew out, the area is X squared, right? Because we have that X squared, plus the 5X and the 2X would be 7X plus 10. Okay, so that's the area of that diagram. Now let's look at this diagram a different way. Okay, so say this whole side over here, that's an X plus that length of 2, right? So I could also write that as X plus 2, right? Now across the bottom, I could write that a different way, right? I could write that as X plus 5. So really, if I wanted to find the area of the whole diagram, a different way to look at it would be X plus 2 times X plus 5. And now we could use what we learned in part 1 of FOIL. Okay, so go and multiply them out. So first we'd have X squared, outer would be a 5X, inner would be a 2X, and last would be a plus 10, giving us X squared plus 7X plus 10. So it's kind of cool, right? The purpose of this is just so that you guys can see that we will get the same answer whether you look at those individual pieces or the whole picture. So that's why when we're doing this multiplication here, that's why we're multiplying everything by everything else, is because we're trying to get the full idea, the full picture. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Just one other quick little piece for today, and then we'll be done. There are some questions in your homework towards the end where they will ask you, is the equation linear or quadratic? And then state whether the graph is a line or a parabola. Okay, so here's how we're going to find out. Whenever it says linear or a line, those two are going to be the same, okay? So a linear equation is just a line. And the way that you would know is if your highest exponent is just a 1, so if it just has an X in it. A quadratic is the same thing as a parabola. Okay, so a quadratic equation, on the picture it looks like a parabola, which a parabola are those graphs that look like this, like a U or an upside down U. You know that it's a quadratic equation if the highest exponent is a 2. Okay, so looking back to our example that we just did, this X squared plus 7X plus 10, do you think that's linear, like a line, or quadratic, like a parabola? This example that we did is quadratic, which means that if we were to draw this out, it would be a picture of a parabola. Okay, so that is a quadratic equation that would have a parabola for a graph. The second one that I have down here, this is going to take some work because it needs to be simplified, right? So remember, we want to distribute our negative. So we're going to have y equals x plus 2 minus 3x minus 5. Okay. Combine our x's. So it looks like I have an x minus 2x, minus a 3x. So I have minus 2x. Then I have a 2 minus a 5, which would be a negative 3. So my simplified equation would be y equals negative 2x minus 3. Do you think that's linear or quadratic? This is an example of a linear equation because the highest exponent that I have is just x to the first, because remember there's a little hidden 1. So it's a linear equation, and if we were to graph this, it would just be a straight line on a graph. So if we had a little graph like this, it would just be a line instead of a U or an upside down U. Also, just so that you know, when you're working through your homework, anytime it says to use a graphing calculator to verify, you do not have to do that, okay? You don't have to go out and buy a graphing calculator. If you wanted to use the graphing calculator, there are some free ones online that I would recommend. All right, that is it for today. Good job.